Many of you have seen how storyboards look when motion pictures are created. They're a sequence of visual frames. However, when creating storyboards for UX, we have a different goal in mind. We need to illustrate the interplay between the user and what the system will be. So it's a little bit different than creating a story per se. It's more about capturing the interaction between user and product. So, it's similar to a movie. It brings the design to life, of course, and there are freeze-frame sketches of how people will work with the system, but the envisioned interaction design solutions are what are a little bit more challenging to capture than what you'd see people using storyboards to create a story. So remember the end goal, and your storyboards will be a little bit more useful than if we were to create a storyboard for a motion picture. Storyboards for user experience are a lot like comic books. There are characters, of course squared screens, and there will be interaction, and of course dialogue showing sequences of flow from frame to frame. So if we look at our storyboards and think, does it tell a story the way a comic book would? That's great. Further, if it shows interaction, that's even better, and that's our end goal. The way we can make our storyboards a bit more like a user experience storyboard than like a movie would be to include the following. First, sketch some pictures and annotate them with just a few words, not too many. All work practice that is part of a task, not just interaction with the system. For example, telephone conversations with agents outside the system. So you want to have a sketch accommodating all outside factors of that work domain. You also need sketches of the devices and screens that you can reuse over and over again in your storyboard. Any and all interaction will need to be sketched. For example, any connections with any internal system interaction. If it were a system with storage, we'd have to sketch the flow to and from the database. Of course, all physical user actions need to be accommodated. Cognitive user interactions can be accommodated through thought balloons. All activities, in our book's case of the ticket kiosk, talking with a friend about what ticket to buy, those are the things that should be sketched. Storyboards can be categorized just like the former categories we've seen in these lessons. Ecology comes into play. What you see here is an example of an ecological storyboard sketch, where you see a user, sort of an anonymous character, at a bus stop near a kiosk. This explains a little bit about our system's environment and how we anticipate that there will be kiosks next to buses, places for users who are waiting to have the opportunity to buy tickets. Here we see the aforementioned thought bubble, where the user's thinking, well, I could stand up and go interact with that kiosk. I know I have 12 minutes, so if the bus is coming sooner, obviously that's not an option, but we need to document thoughts, and this is one method. And the arrow here is excellent. We want to be as explicative as possible. And this is the user interacting with the kiosk, which does need to be included in your storyboard. Even though it may be obvious about the interaction, this tells a story, and it also says that this user is in a place where if the bus does come, he will not miss the bus, which is, there's a lot more to just this simple sketch than you might think. After you look at it, you think, okay, we've got a kiosk, we've got an empty bench, no one else is there, but what else? What is the other story? And the story is that this user feels comfortable that he will not miss the bus. And now the user returns to the bench satisfied with movie tickets in hand. Now, what's the point of having the movie tickets in there? Well, there's thought that can be derived from this. Are those movie tickets safe? Should they be in a safer envelope? Should we attach maybe a latch to the envelope? That kind of brainstorming needs to occur because of these storyboards. But without this image, I may not think about the fact that this user might drop his movie tickets. And if he drops them, he would need some method of recovering them. Maybe he could go and reprint them. There's a lot of things that can be derived from storyboards. So we don't want to minimize the importance of sketching even the most mundane detail. Even the sketch of the bus picking up the user is important. The things that can be thought of this is what is the user's income level? Do we need to accommodate them with transportation? Maybe we print out a bus schedule with the tickets. So there are a lot of things that come into the entire interaction with not just ecological storyboard sketches, but all storyboard sketches. Now what about if the ticket kiosks were in other places? We would need more ecological storyboard sketches. In this case, we show the user who's bored on the phone in a mall, walking near a bench. And now we need to think about that user who's been introduced and where the most appropriate place in a mall would be to place our kiosk. So let's move forward. In this case, we see the same kiosk, which was the finished version of our brainstorming a few lessons ago, where it's completely enclosed, there's privacy, there's a step-up ramp where the user has to step up, and in this case we have an ecological storyboard sketch covering the initial interaction between the user and that kiosk. He sees it in the middle of the mall instead of being wedged between stores. He's got an idea, he figures he's going to call his friends, let's get something going with, we can go out to a movie, something like that. In this storyboard sketch, we see the anticipated audio coming from the kiosk booth. We don't know what that audio is. We see KIO, which is kiosk. However, we know that there's some sort of announcement. This leaves it open for suggestion. The next sketch will enrich us into the idea of what that sound might be. In this sketch, we see the user has gone into the kiosk and we have an occupied sign. Is it possible that the audio in the previous slide is announcing that this kiosk is occupied? That would be somewhat distracting to the user. More than likely, the audio is perhaps announcing movies, what's playing, things like that. That previous slide, I might say, is faulty because it doesn't enrich us into the concept of what is being broadcast. We only can anticipate that, so I would want to know more about that. But in this case, the sketch communicates to me that there is an occupied sign, which is great because there's only one booth inside this enclosed kiosk. That gives the user a little bit more time and comfort in order to purchase a ticket. If you recall in one of the first few slides of these lessons, when we introduced this kiosk project, users went up to a ticket agent, a human, and felt less than satisfied when they left. They felt like they weren't offered the best choice in seats. This kiosk enclosed with an occupied sign is a nice solution to that problem. We now have the ability to keep our user comfortable and let them take their time choosing tickets. So far, we've covered the ecological perspective storyboards. The next few slides will cover interaction perspective storyboard sketches. In this case, we see almost the user's perspective being inside the kiosk. We see a welcome message. We see a pedagogical figure or a human figure above the welcome message. Here we see further interaction with a pin keyboard pad. Notice how there's only 9 keys. Well, I'm being picky here, but the fact is that it is amplified, and it may be this actual size if it's actually a digital touchscreen, which is certainly more easy than a smaller pin pad. And here our digital screen shows the options that we plan on presenting: movie tickets, sports, and concerts. Each piece of interaction needs to be covered in the interaction perspective. Here we see a description of the event, the options that will be payable, including cash and PayPal. Of course, I don't see credit cards, but I think you get the idea on this. The fact that they plan on offering a PayPal option, I think that probably the credit card part of it's probably assumed. But the dollar sign indicates that they might have some cash option as well. Alternative options might be displayed as well with an interaction perspective sketch. Here we see a walkthrough pattern with steps 1, 2, and 3 that take us through. The previous slides showed a pattern of replacing each screen with the current step. The previous screen will work fine as long as you label each step and give people the opportunity to navigate forward and back. But we do use interaction perspective sketches for multiple opportunities of how we might interact with the product. Because we have an ample amount of space on our digital screen, we can now introduce alternative functionalities like social media. In this case, we see the user able to bring up social media boxes in order to inform them of the movie plans. And that's a great idea to expand sales. Here on the right you see the sign, drop your friends here to tell them. So you can just log into Facebook, drag the friends into the little box, and then it emails that friend or notifies them with some messaging device that you're setting up some sort of movie and offer them if they want to come along, which is actually pretty innovative, and that's an excellent idea. And here we see the extra dialogue with the user communicating with his friend about the extra 2 tickets. But this creates a secondary problem. Wouldn't it be nice if they could possibly have an accompanying mobile app where they could buy the tickets as well? So this is an excellent sketch that really tells a lot about how this system will be set up and what its needs are and what it possibly is lacking now. We've been through ecological and interaction perspective storyboard sketches. We need to talk about the importance of between frame transitions. There are the storyboard frames in the individual states and static screenshots that you've seen, but the frame-to-frame progression of interaction over time is really important. Those previous slides all were good. They all had good communicative ability. But when placed in between the other story screens, they add more to the message. And you could probably figure that out, of course, in this PowerPoint presentation. You only see one screen at a time, and you tend to lose the before and after effect on it. But when it's a frame-by-frame, fully visual on a storyboard, and it tells a story, we get more detail, more enriched content of the storyline of how this thing will work. In fact, the dynamics of the time between the slides, between the screenshots, between those squares in our user experience comic book, that's where user experience exists. The transitions are where the users are thinking. Cognitive affordances in your design earn their keep. In other words, if we can afford that our users can cognitively identify where they are, then we can be assured that we're on the right step, on the right trail of good user experience. We want to help users think about what to do next. Think about the slide with the 3 steps on the left and the social media opportunities on the right. It helps them think, okay, I can invite some friends to go to the movie with me. That's a huge thing. We need to help them cognitively understand how to use the system. And storyboards help us achieve that, and that solves one of the hardest problems for designers to overcome where the potential problems might be. So think about it. Without that storyboard, the idea of inviting friends socially wouldn't have happened. It's okay, buddy. So there are a few ways we can help those transitions and make them a little bit more understandable. One way is to add frames that show circumstances that lead to those transitions. Use as many thought bubbles, gestures, and reactions as possible. You could even have descriptive metaphors like confusion and things like that pointing to the user's head. That can help us understand the state of being as we transfer from frame to frame to frame to really understand what's happening. Just as an example about how beneficial words are with sketches, let's compare this slide with the next one. Here we see a slide of the user, you've seen this picture, choosing which event to go to, whether it's a movie, a sporting event, or a concert. So keep this in mind, and let's go to the next slide. Now with our thought bubble, we see some explanation to why the hand is moving. It's in motion. And of course it reads, all these choices look good. I guess I'll pick a concert over a football game this time. But it adds an illumination to the interaction between the user and the system. He's looking at all things. All the items on the screen are getting equal play, which is what we sort of shoot for. And it does explain the state change. Okay, we're going to a concert. The term embodied interaction is used a lot in our text. And when it's referred to in a design state, it means how a user's body is interacting with technology. But the embodiment of this is about using natural gestures, being natural with posture, exactly the way the user might interact. So we're actually envisioning that user being off-screen and interacting in the real world. So you'll see things like slumping, leaning. Our sketches in this lesson have kind of shown that. Confusion, where the neck is sort of tilted. We try to use the description of the physical body to show mood of the user. And that's designed for embodied interaction. It's actually quite a skill to sketch interaction and embodiment and to visually display the mood or body language of a user. Sometimes you can just grow into it. You don't need to be a great artist to do this. You look at certain physical characteristics like droopiness. He could be jumping for joy, happiness if they have an erect posture. But the term embodiment is something that has to do with UX in a lot of ways, and the text has some definitions about it. It's how nature of living entities' cognition shaped by form and its physical manifestation in the world. And that's sort of an ambiguous, non-specific definition. Think of what a person's body language tells you whenever they're doing anything. And that can kind of bring you to the next level of, okay, emotion translates into body language. So how we understand the world, ourselves, and interaction comes from where we are in the physical and social world of embodied factors. That's from Dorish, who's referenced in the text a lot. But the concept of this, if you reduce the complicated descriptions of embodiment and focus on how it can help you create a storyboard and be as explicative as possible about the possibilities of the human emotion and human body language while interacting with the product, your storyboard is going to be so much more richer or more rich than if you didn't. Let's say you just did a stick figure. You'd lose so much of the value of a storyboard. And that's really kind of where we want to go with this. You want to see, if we're designing for interaction, that user and what he's feeling. If you could display that with a sketch, that's the end goal for good storyboarding. We see good examples of embodiment descriptors in board games. And this is Scrabble Flash, and I think it's a good way to close out this lesson. It's almost a storyboard frame, but it shows interaction with tiles that can actually show us when a word is made. That's what Scrabble Flash does. But if you look at the body language of the players here, it's certainly a motive of an easily interactive game. And you see they're quite satisfied with it, and they're definitely communicating a message. So that's a decent example of embodiment and embodiment for design.